Thank you for stepping in to our space. My name is Mel, and this is Banyan Women's Collective, and we are here today to learn about our periods, to bust some myths on things that we've been told as we've grown up, whether it was the curse or, Aunt Flo. We're going to learn that our periods should not be an end-all be-all to our week, and we're going to get some helpful tools on how to navigate that. My hope for this class is that not only will educate the people watching, but we can also take that knowledge and share it with the younger women around us, so this is no longer a secret. All right, and I'm going to pass this on to Martina. Here we go.
Awesome. Thanks, Mel. Hi, Allie, and everyone watching. I'm Martina. I'm a certified nutrition consultant, and I am really passionate about female health, women's health, menstruating people's health, and helping people hack their hormones to just feel awesome. Because as Mel said, this story we've been told about our periods is problematic, and we're here to bust that wide open. So I would love to start, since we're a small group here live, we're just going to use the chat, but I have a question for you. And that question I will put on the screen. Mel, I don't see screen sharing. Oh, there it is, sorry, popped up. My question is, right now, today, how would you describe your period? What words would you use? What is your relationship like with your period? How do you feel when you hear that word? And as that comes to you, I would love for you to throw that into the chat. I'm just adding your answers onto our board here to keep them all in one spot. Mm-hmm. Yep. So some words I've seen pop up so far that are on our screen are annoyed, bloated, tired. Maybe you're hurting. It's all a mess. Maybe it's confusing, like you don't know when it's going to happen or what's going on or why you feel the way you do. Yes, Candy, love that. That's really common too. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing those experiences. I think it won't surprise you to hear that you're not alone. But if you walk away with just one thing today, I really want it to be this, which is that this experience, collective experience we've all had, is actually not our body's normal, optimal way of functioning. And this is actually a byproduct of a lot of different factors we're going to talk about, but you don't have to accept it. And that's really empowering. This isn't something we're a slave to, and this isn't something that should take over 1/4 of our life. This truly is something that you can kind of reclaim with some tools we're going to talk about today, and like relabel your relationship with your cycle, because this doesn't have to be it. So keeping those words in mind, we're going to jump in. I'm going to get this large for us. Before we jump in, I do just want to make really clear that I am not a medical professional. And so we are going to talk about some different foods and supplements and potential like medical things that are happening in your body. This is meant for general education and information and should not be considered medical advice. I do encourage you to take this information to your medical providers to form a plan together for healing. So with that in mind, let's talk about this. If this isn't normal, but everyone seems to experience it, why? Why are we so out of sync with our cycle? For so many of us, our cycles and our periods are like a punchline, a joke. Maybe they feel like an enemy that we're battling. And honestly, this is something that happens when our patriarchal society encounters something that it can't control or doesn't understand. And women's periods for all of time has been that for a lot of cultures and societies that has brought us where we are today. So this is taboo, not because it's embarrassing, but because we've been taught by our patriarchal society that it is something we don't talk about because they don't get it. So we're going to reclaim that today because we do get it, and it is actually a powerful thing for us. We're going to talk about like what's happening in your body throughout the month because it really varies from day to day. And we're going to talk about how to really optimize your diet and your lifestyle so you're like in sync with your flow. So you're not fighting against nature and your natural tendencies. And for those symptoms you might be experiencing, the achiness, the exhaustion, the grumpiness, we're going to talk about why that might be happening and what you can do about it. So I highly recommend, if you haven't already, you maybe grab something to write with, take a couple notes, because we are going to get into some like nitty gritty of what's going on when and what to eat on which days. It's going to be really interesting, and I want to make sure you got them. I'm also happy to share these slides with you at the end. If you want to shoot me an email after the workshop, I will email them straight to you. But if you'd like to take notes, I invite you to grab something now. So before we go too much further, I just want you to take a peek at this list of symptoms on the screen. And I want you to ask yourself if any of these things feel normal to you. And maybe just count up the number of symptoms or things that you can say a confident yes to. Oh, so sorry. Let's go back to that. Once you have that number, either write it down or throw it into the chat. So I have good news and bad news here, friends. The good news, or the bad news I should start with, is that this isn't normal. And if you're experiencing these on a regular basis, this is your body talking to you and letting you know there's something out of whack somewhere. It's asking for help. The good news is that there is a lot we can do about it, right? You're not helpless, and that's what we're here to figure out today. The last thing I'm going to ask you before you jump in is do a little bit of mental math, if you can, if you know, to figure out which day of your cycle you might be on, like right now. This will be helpful as we talk through. It'll just be interesting for you to note where you're at. So day 1 would be the first day of bleeding. So just keep that number in your mind. I don't need to know it, but it's helpful for you to keep in mind. So in order to understand how to help and heal your cycle, you're going to need to kind of get a basic overview of what happens, because sex ed, to be honest, left out a lot of information that's important to us. I'm going to try to keep it brief, even though I could geek out about this all day long. But just so that you know, when I say cycle, what I mean is your full 28-day pattern. And when I say period, I mean those few days that you are actually bleeding. So that can sometimes be interchangeable, but that's how we'll be using those words today. So here's your cycle. Meet your cycle. Here it is. In general, your cycle is divided up into 2 phases. So the first half we call the follicular phase, and it is really, really dictated by estrogen. So estrogen is rising throughout this whole phase, and estrogen is the man in charge. What's happening inside the body is that rising estrogen helps prepare you for ovulation. So that's where your egg gets dropped to either make a baby or get passed through. Externally, during this phase, you're going to have a lot of energy. You're going to have a lot of social tendencies. Your sex drive will probably be higher in this phase than any other time of the month. And we tend to be really like creative and outgoing. Biologically, that makes sense because during this phase, you're like trying to find a mate. Your body's trying to help you find a mate, right? The second half of the phase is called the luteal phase, and that's really run by progesterone, which is estrogen's like complete opposite. Inside the body, what's happening is the egg is released And where that egg was released, it's called a follicle, and that little guy starts making progesterone for your body. Outside, that progesterone makes us a lot more chill. So we might be more introverted, we might be more just kind of like satisfied and relaxed. We may be less social, and we may have less energy overall. Those are the two big overarching phases. Now within that, there are two sort of events that are going to be really important. The first is your period, which we're all very familiar with. Those are the first 5 to 7-ish days for most people, where your uterus is actually shedding and you're bleeding, right? So you clearly know when you're on your period. That uterus is shedding because those hormones all took a big old plummet. So your hormonal levels during your period are very low, which makes sense when you think about the sort of lack of energy and sluggishness that you guys mentioned. Your hormones are very low, and so it makes sense you'd have less energy. You also tend to be just a lot more introverted during this time. Biologically speaking, you don't have a lot of motivation to go put yourself out there during your period, and so your body is sort of in rest mode. Ovulation occurs around day 14 for most people, but can vary. It can be up to day 18 or even 20, and that can be normal. And ovulation is just where the egg is actually dropped. So I know I just went through a lot of the sort of science of your cycle. If you have any questions about that part, throw them in the chat now, because we're going to keep going to talk about what each phase sort of needs. Awesome. So just keep in mind as we move forward, follicular is that first half. Progesterone is, luteal is that second half. And you'll want to keep straight which one has the estrogen, which is the first half, and which one has more progesterone, which is the second half. Great. So now let's talk about the characteristics here, because these changes in hormones really changes what your body's asking for and what it needs. There's like different rules to the game here. So during the follicular phase, this first half, like I said, your biological goal is to like meet your mate, get out there. So you do have more energy and you're more social. You may have a higher sex drive, or maybe have like more confidence during this phase. Your metabolism is also actually more efficient. Estrogen helps us respond to insulin better. So you can kind of get away with more carbs during the first half without as many negative effects on your blood sugar, which I think is really interesting. One really key piece to remember is down here in the bottom corner, and it's around detox. So during this phase, our estrogens are rising. And as our body uses and creates all these estrogen hormones, it also needs to eliminate the hormonal waste that comes with that. And if they're not eliminated properly, they end up circulating in our body and our estrogen levels get way out of whack. That can cause a lot of the PMS symptoms that people complain about. And the key solution here is detox. Our liver is primarily in charge of getting rid of those excess hormones. So if our liver is working great, it can keep all that estrogen in check. If for some reason we're not detoxing correctly, we end up with way too much estrogen, and that causes tons of problems. So we're going to talk about how to detox that here in just a sec. During your luteal phase, your actual goal here biologically is to like maintain and grow a pregnancy, biologically speaking, right? So even if you're not trying to get pregnant, your body's setting the stage kind of just in case. So you're generally a lot more chill. You're in like rest mode. You actually are hungrier during this time of the month. So if maybe you guys have experienced like right before your period, you might like just feel like you can't get enough food. That's really common. And that's not something to ignore. Your body actually needs more fuel during this time. You also metabolize carbs less effectively. The progesterone kind of keeps the insulin from being quite as responsive. So just something to keep in mind, your carbs are going to pack a bigger punch during the second half. And your immune system is also a little bit down-regulated because of trying to maintain that theoretical pregnancy during that time. The most important thing during the second half, this luteal phase, is going to be supporting progesterone. We got to keep that progesterone coming to keep everything in check and to keep you feeling good. Usually what happens is if we have too much estrogen in the beginning, not enough progesterone in the second half, then our period ends up feeling like a crapshoot and we just like crash completely because things are out of whack there. So again, I just went through a lot of specifics. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat before you forget. I don't want to move on and leave you confused. But we're going to start jumping into some symptoms. Awesome. So here are some core like root causes that might be causing some of these symptoms you're talking about. Nutrient deficiencies play a huge role. Stress and inflammation both dysregulate our hormones and can exacerbate those symptoms that we were mentioning. Blood sugar plays a really big role in this. Blood sugar is really intricately connected to your hormones. Digestive issues can cause detox issues. So all that estrogen I mentioned keeps building up. And then toxins from our environment can also play a big role here. They can interfere with the way our hormones work. The most common thing that I see is that people's estrogen and progesterone ratio is just off. Either there's too much estrogen overall, or there's not enough progesterone to keep things in check. It is possible for that to be flipped, but it's less common. For most people, the lifestyle that we lead today lends itself towards more estrogens. So a lot of what we talk about today is going to be how to keep estrogen at a healthy level and bump progesterone to balance that out. If that happens throughout the month, your periods can feel like a piece of cake. You can notice that they're there and they cannot disrupt your life or keep you from doing the things that you want to do. We're not going to be able to dive super deep into all of these things. For most people, there's a combination of things going on. So I encourage you, if you feel like you need more guidance, to reach out for a one-on-one consult or talk to your healthcare provider and get some maybe testing or recommendations. But it is helpful to know that all of this could be at play and that this estrogen progesterone balance is going to be really important. So let's talk, this is a quote that I offer to a lot of my clients. And it really can help when you get to a painful period, understand what's going on. So the way you feel around your period is a direct reflection of how you've treated your body over the last month. And that's a little bit of tough love there, but it truly does matter. And so if I'm having a cycle that feels less than great, I can usually pause and ask myself, like, what have I changed over this month? Have I been more stressed? Have I been drinking more alcohol? Have I been not sleeping as well? Is my digestion off? And even just being able to pinpoint problems can be super empowering because then you know what to do about it for next time. You don't have to just surrender to repeating the same cycle over and over again. So let's talk about this food. Why does food matter when it comes to our periods? I don't know about you, but this was completely left out of my health education as a kid, but it matters. It really does. And here's why. Hormones are going to run your show, and hormones are built by the nutrients that we eat. So good quality food equals good quality hormones that can do their job. Hormones also run your metabolism, and they really impact how you respond to insulin, which manages your blood sugar. All of that really impacts how you feel. Plus, hormones are really important with our neurotransmitter processes, and neurotransmitters, especially serotonin, have actually been shown to relieve PMS symptoms. So if our hormones are off, you can see how it's this cascade of blood sugar issues, energy issues, mood issues like neurotransmitters and serotonin, all coming from some kind of hormone imbalance. That detox system that I mentioned is also super important. So y'all, if you're not pooping every day, your estrogen's gonna build up. It just is. So making sure that your digestion and your liver are really supported throughout the month, especially that first half when our estrogen is so high, is going to really, really help things. All of this kind of boils down to these three sort of tenets that we're going to talk about, which is nutrient-rich foods, keeping your blood sugar happy, and then supporting your liver. Those are the three main strategies for really hacking this period thing and helping keep your hormones back in check. I'm going to jump into like what to eat when. So if you have a pen and paper, this is a great place to take some notes. I will also be sending you a sort of one pager with these lists of foods, so don't feel like you have to write down every word. If you have questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat as we move through. So here's how you can be a folly friend during your follicular phase. So remember, that's the first half where your estrogen is rising. This is a list of foods that really support detoxing in your liver. And the other key here is going to be really healthy fats for that egg and follicle development, because this is before the egg drops. So those two things together are going to be really important for keeping all your hormones in check here. And this list of foods will get you there. One thing I want to point out are these starred seeds down at the bottom, the flax seeds and pumpkin seeds. Have any of you guys ever heard of seed cycling before, or maybe tried it? If you have, throw it in the chat. I'm curious if anyone's tried it before, because that's also a hot topic these days. But basically, seed cycling is where you eat 1 to 2 tablespoons of specific seeds at different points in your cycle. And seeds themselves are super nutrient dense and really supportive for healthy hormones. And if you're intentional about what kinds of seeds when, it can really help support healthy estrogen and progesterone. A lot of people have had great success with it, and it's kind of one of those like can't hurt things that can be really, really helpful for balancing out those hormones. So during the follicular phase, the seeds you would want to eat are flax seeds and pumpkin seeds. And if you were wanting to try this, I usually recommend that you grind up flaxseed and pumpkin seeds together, and then 1 to 2 tablespoons go in your food every day. Yogurt or smoothies, sprinkled on vegetables. They can be just like a little garnish. But if they're already ground and like mixed together, ready to go, that's a really easy way to get them in. So before I move on, I just want you to do like a quick check. That list of foods is over here on the left. Either write down on your notes or throw it in the chat. What do you think are 3 of these foods, maybe 3 foods you know you already love, that you can be really intentional about eating, like throughout that first half of your cycle, maybe every day or every other day? Which are your 3 foods? Throw them in the chat or write them down for yourself. Yes. Yeah, it's a great list to go off of. If you want to do the seed mixture, you would do about 1 to 2 tablespoons every day throughout that phase of your cycle. Yeah. Perfect. So keep your little list somewhere so you can keep in mind where you're going to start. We're going to move to talk now about the luteal phase, that second half. So this is after ovulation now. Your estrogen's going down and your progesterone hopefully is nice and high. The name of the game here is we got to support progesterone. We got to support the production of progesterone and keeping those levels where they need to be. So the most helpful things for that are vitamin C, magnesium, and B vitamins. So you see a list here. You'll notice a few overlaps of foods that are great for both. And you'll notice some specific ones for this phase that are really high in those nutrients. It's also important to note that carbohydrates are not as well processed during the second half. Remember, our insulin is a little bit more sensitive. And so it's important to, when you can, focus on protein and fat during this phase and do less carbs. But it's also important to honor your hunger. If you remember back to that other slide, you're hungrier during this phase. That's normal. You actually need more calories, like 200 to 300 more calories on average during this phase. That's not a small amount. That's like a whole nother snack, right? A whole nother mini meal. So don't ignore the hunger, but when you can, if you choose those protein and fat-rich sources, you are going to feel better in the long run. The other thing I'm going to throw out there for this phase is you're leading up to your period. So this is the time when really upping, especially things like magnesium and B vitamins, can help a lot with cramps. So if you're someone that experiences cramps or like painful periods, I would really focus on magnesium rich foods, maybe even a magnesium supplement, and then those B vitamins during this time. B vitamin rich foods will really help. Dark chocolate is a great one. Go for the dark chocolate. You'll notice the seeds also switch during this phase. So if you're doing the seed cycling, you're going to switch to now doing sesame and sunflower seeds together. And you can always sprinkle the whole seeds, but you can also kind of grind them up into a mixture, like I mentioned, and just sprinkle them on. You would just switch. You wouldn't do pumpkin and flax anymore. Now you do sesame and sunflower. So go ahead and either throw in the chat or write on your notes. Now on the second half, what can you really focus on? Maybe your 3 favorites on this list. You do have a nutrition consultant telling you to go eat chocolate, so yes, these are great. Perfect. Any questions on the luteal phase before we move on? And now we're entering berry season. It'll be even easier. Awesome. So keep now those luteal foods on your list, on your goal list. Let's talk about that time that you're actually on your period, because for a lot of people, that is the time that feels really hard. You're exhausted because your hormones have dropped. You have very little motivation to do anything. You kind of just feel blah. A certain amount of that is normal. I just want to say it is normal to have less energy. It is also normal to be less social. But I think that's not something to like dread and complain about necessarily. It can feel empowering to know this is part of my natural cycle. This is the time in my month where I like am more introverted, where I need to plan less outings, where I need to allow the couch Netflix binges. Whatever you need, I think is normal. Now, if you just want to like sleep all day and are super grumpy and snapping at people, that is less normal. And that one we can hopefully help with our nutrition here. So the name of the game for your period is going to be plenty of iron-rich foods, plenty of proteins, and plenty of really healthy fats. You will likely be a little bit hungrier during your period. You are losing some blood, and so that impacts your iron levels in your body. It's also really normal if your hormones have been off throughout the month. It's really normal to crave sugary and like carby things during this time. You may have experienced that. So one thing to note is that during your period, the more refined carbs and alcohol that you consume, honestly, the more crummy you're going to feel. It really impacts when your hormones are that low. Your threshold for like what your body can sort of like buffer for you is just lower. And so it may feel great in the moment, but you will probably notice a more lasting effect if you're able to avoid those things. So I really try to not consume any alcohol at all on my period when I can, and I've noticed a big difference. But just be aware, if it feels worth it, just know this might make me feel crummy tomorrow, and just kind of watch that. Over here are some of those iron-rich foods that I mentioned. One thing I always advise people on is that some of these plant-based forms of iron, like the spinach and the lentils, they can be great, but they are harder for our bodies to absorb. So that's why some of these vitamin C foods are on here, like bell peppers, that helps the absorption. So if you're eating lentils, for example, because you want some extra iron during your period, which is great, throw in some bell peppers or strawberries or citrus, something with vitamin C to help that absorption. That can also be really normal, Allie, to not have any appetite at all in your period. That hormone drop can really, it kind of depends on where your blood sugar sort of lives on average, but that can be normal. I think what's important here is to honor your body's signals and to make sure that whatever you are eating is as nutrient dense as you can make it. That's what's going to help you the most. Especially coming off that luteal phase, though, your body's been prepping for this theoretical pregnancy, so it's kind of asking for more and more and more and more. Then when the period comes, obviously that theoretical pregnancy is not there, and so it is normal for your body to be like, nope, I'm good. Beautiful. So add on to your list now, during that period week, what can you throw in, or what can you try to take out that's going to really help support that natural cycle and help you feel less crummy? Yeah, chia seeds can be really great at this time. Does anyone have any favorite ways of eating chia seeds they want to share? Throw some ideas out there. My goal this summer is to try chia jam. I have never made it, but I've seen pictures and it looks super simple, so I'm going to try to find a recipe. Chia pudding is bomb. Love it. Yeah, apparently if you add like pureed berries, they'll like really jam up and make like a jelly consistency. I don't know. I'll try it. I'll let you guys know. Beautiful. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about some supplements and herbs that can be helpful. But before I do, are there any questions about the foods we've talked about so far? Any foods that you're like, I'd love to, but how? What do you do with that food? Or questions about like sort of the science of your cycle and what's going on with your symptoms? Yeah, that's a great question, Mel. So during this time, like right before menopause or in the few years before, and you're really starting to feel that body and cycle change, things shift a little bit, right? Because during menopause, you're actually losing estrogen at a higher rate than your other hormones. And so a lot of the uncomfortable symptoms of menopause come from low estrogen, which is kind of opposite of a lot of the stuff we just talked about. So what's going to be really key is continuing to keep your detox moving. So all those detox liver foods that we talked about, but also adding really like those B vitamins are going to be key. Organ meats, if you can do them, liver and things like that. Think like proteins and rich, healthy fats for that. And those periods of our life where we're not getting periods can be really interesting. I'm actually postpartum right now, and so I'm still not having periods. And what I often help people do is you can actually feel a little bit of alignment with the moon cycles, which feels a little bit far out there, but there's some really interesting science behind the way our bodies naturally sync up with the moon, especially if we're not on any hormonal birth control. And that can be a really interesting way to eat as well. On that note, before we start talking about supplements, I do just want to throw something out about birth control. If you are on hormonal birth control to manage period symptoms, which is incredibly common, one thing to note is that, like I said, those period symptoms are communicating something to you, right? They are there for a reason. And what the birth control is actually doing is kind of just silencing them. It's not really solving the root issue of nutrient deficiencies or inflammation or anything like that that we talked about. And so while hormonal birth control can be an incredible tool, it's also really important to get to the root cause and not just shut the symptoms up for 10 years straight, because as you can imagine, that can cause some issues later on when those issues are left unchecked. So I really always encourage people to use birth control for birth control when possible, and to heal your hormones differently rather than trying to sort of band-aid the symptoms. Awesome. Keep those questions coming. Let's talk about some supplements. So I can't recommend specific supplements or like dosages to you personally without knowing your situation and your health history. This is a list of some that if I were you and you were having symptoms, I would recommend you to at least ask your doctor or your health practitioner about them. If you do want some recommendations about like which specific ones you might need for your symptoms, that's something that would be an awesome one-on-one consult, and you can schedule that and we can chat more together. But in general, this is a great list to start with. So magnesium really improves cramps, sleep, painful periods, stress. And if you're really grumpy, if you like bite people's heads off around your period, if your significant other walks on eggshells around you, magnesium can be great. So that's one I would recommend. DIM, D-I-M, is a compound that helps to get rid of excess estrogens. It's really effective at breaking those down. So if you're having these symptoms of too much estrogen, that DIM can be great. Adaptogenic herbs is actually a family of herbs that helps our stress response. And stress is really important because if we are too stressed, our body is going to pause ovulation. Okay, our body's going to say it's not safe to have a baby right now, so we're not going to ovulate. If I'm stressed, that's like an unsafe situation. The problem with that, if you remember back a few slides, when we ovulate, that spot that our egg dropped from starts to make progesterone. It becomes this like mini organ, and that's where a ton of our progesterone comes from. So if we don't ovulate at all, our progesterone is just too low in general, and that can cause a lot of imbalanced issues. All of that to say, whether you want a baby or not, ovulating is really important. And so keeping that stress under control so your body knows it's safe to ovulate is really important there. B vitamins really help with also cramps and stress and keep our progesterone super healthy. And then Vitex and chasteberry is an herb that's been super effective at regulating cycles that are maybe really irregular, like you never know when your period's coming. Maybe you're not ovulating, right? Maybe you've been on birth control for a long time and your body hasn't started its own ovulation yet. That's really common. Or you know that your progesterone seems low based on your symptoms, right? You know that things are sort of out of whack here. And Vitex can be something really great in the short term to help get that on track. That's a really great question, Allie. And in general, she asked how effective is like foods that are high in that nutrient versus a supplement. In general, I always say food first. Food is going to be the most complete source of that, and is going to give you the best well-rounded support. I think when it comes to period issues and cycle issues and hormones, it can also be really effective to have this targeted support in the form of a supplement. But if you are wanting to sort of feel things out on your own, if you're not wanting to work with a health practitioner, I would definitely start with food first and see if you can get any results. And then after a couple months, if you're still not feeling like you're feeling better, that's when I might start to dip my toe into these supplements. For some people, being really intentional about food can be enough. It's a great question. The herbs obviously will come in their herb form. Any other questions about the supplements or the herbs? Awesome. Okay, let's talk about this last piece that I mentioned in that list, which is toxins. So there's a couple of things that come into this, but both stress and your toxic load are just going to be critical pieces in this healing process. If you're having period issues, this is one of the first places that I help people start. Like I said, stress is going to signal your body not to ovulate at all. Plus, cortisol, that stress hormone, is going to disrupt a bunch of your other hormones in the process. So if your cortisol is too high, it's going to really mess with your progesterone and with your testosterone and just cause all kinds of havoc in there. The other key piece here is toxic load. Toxic load refers to the accumulation of all of our little exposures, right? This one tiny thing in your dishwasher detergent might not be a huge deal, but when you're exposed to hundreds or thousands of chemicals a day, it can really add up and tax your liver, which, as we mentioned before, is a huge piece of this hormone cycle here, is keeping your liver really happy and healthy. So if there's anything we can do to take some load off the liver, that's going to be super important. Some of these toxins are in like our personal care products, our cleaning products, our water even, furniture. They can kind of be all around us. But one place I recommend starting is, well, there's a lot of places to start, so wherever you feel passionate, but an easy one, if you're like, where do I start? Checking your deodorant can be helpful. A lot of deodorant has aluminum in it, which can build up in our body. We absorb through our armpits. It can build up in our body and disrupt our hormones. So if you want to check out some aluminum-free deodorants, there's some great ones out there. We are also, Banyan Women is hosting a Toxins 101 workshop next month on May the 19th. And you can register for that. I believe it'll be posted in the next couple of days. You can register for it. And we're going to dive much deeper into what toxins are doing to us and where to find them, and then how to like swap things out in a not overwhelming way, because it can feel really overwhelming. But like I said, just little things can add up. The last thing that I want to end us with is just thinking a little bit about our lifestyle and the way that our lives are set up. So you've just heard a lot about how different points in the month are actually really different for us. It's very normal for us to feel more social and energetic one week and then to feel completely tired and like introverted another week. And I think what's really interesting is that our society and our world has really been set up on this 24-hour model, right? Like we wake up and we kind of do the same thing every day on a 24-hour loop. That's actually the male hormonal cycle. They have their own little mini cycle like we do, and it's 24 hours long. I think that's fascinating that we are expected to sort of fit ourselves into that male model. But our cycle is 28 days long, and it's different. And so treating every day like it's exactly the same with your work, with your social life, with your exercise, with your food, it actually is going against your biology. And so using this information we talked about today to sort of lean into the flow of your life and of your month can be really empowering. So don't be afraid to lean into that. And don't be afraid to expect more from your cycle and say, no, I don't have to feel like crap. And work throughout the month to build yourself up to that happy week where you can have your period and still feel great. Before we close, I would actually love to go back to our little board that we made at the beginning. I'm curious now, we're going to leave these words up here because these are real. This is our experience. But I am curious now what words you would add to describe your cycle based on what you've heard today, based on what your goals are maybe. What words can we add about your relationship or about your period? Throw them in the chat and I'll put them on our board. I'm going to make these pink. Nope.
And Martina, I just wanted to jump in real quick because we had some people joining late, and for everyone that joined late, I want you to know that we did record this, and the very beginning, she gave a roadmap of how to eat, what to eat, and how your body will most likely feel in the follicular and the luteal stages. So really important information. I really push that once I get this recording up, that you revisit this. And Martina's also offered her slides as well. And of course, ongoing communication direct with Martina if you need support.
Yes, thanks, Mel. I'd love to give you just a couple more seconds if there's any other words you want to throw up. Mm, love that. Beautiful. Well, I encourage you to continue to be curious about your cycle each month. And if you are experiencing things that you don't like, try to understand why and really work to sort of make friends with your cycle because she's there to help you. And she truly is a superpower that links us to the earth, that links us to each other, that provides life. And so caring for her, I think, is an important piece of overall health. I'm leaving you on the screen with these sort of 3 big steps that we walked through. I know we got into a lot of details, but in general, if you're ready to get started, start by tracking your cycle so you can understand which phase you're in, how long it is it regular, those sorts of things. Adding in those foods for specific times of the month, and then reducing the stress and the toxins will be really important. I would love to take a couple minutes for questions at this time. Feel free to throw them in the chat. Allie, I see your question about exercise. That's a great question. In general, this can be slightly different for people. So I think what's most important is just to listen to your body. But in general, your hormones will support a higher intensity exercise during the first half of your cycle. So that follicular phase where you have more estrogen, you're going to recover faster. You're going to have more energy and motivation in general. And you'll also be more social. So that's a really great time for like group classes and group exercise. In general, that luteal phase, the second half, is going to be a better time for more maybe lower intensity walking, yoga, that sort of thing can feel really good during that second half. Yeah. What other questions do we have? Awesome. Well, you all will get my contact information in the follow-up email. I'd love to leave you with just a couple of ways to keep in touch. I do have an email newsletter that I send out weekly that has a lot of sort of nutrition deep dives into different topics, specific mostly to menstruating people's hormones, fertility, postpartum period, that sort of thing. But can really, a lot of people can get a lot out of them, especially if you're someone who menstruates. So there's recipes included every week, exclusive offers and discounts for my email service. So I'll throw that link in the chat too if you'd like to save it. I'd love to have you sign up, but that's a great way to keep in touch. And then I do offer one-on-one coaching, which is my favorite thing to do. I just love diving in with people to figure out what's happening and why and what we can do about it. So I would love to offer 15% off for all of you for coming to this class, to any one-on-one coaching you'd like to do. You can book a initial consult and we can talk through them and see what we can do for each other there. And if you'd like to write down my Instagram handle, I'm also very active on Instagram and offer a lot of free content there, and would love for you to connect over there as well. So my email's on the screen. I believe it'll also be in the follow-up email from Mel. But that is all I have for you guys. I'll leave this on the screen for a sec if you want to write it down. But thank you guys so much for coming. This was so great.
And we'll definitely make sure on our social medias as well to share your offer. And Anybody that watched today, I just, once again, my hope is that this information is passed down to others. So you have a sister, you have cousins, you have a good friend, especially if they have young women in the house, because to my knowledge, this information is still not being given to our youth, and there is absolutely no reason that it shouldn't. So the recording will be up. Give it to all the people that you care about and make sure that this information is shared, because this is also something I remember in school and I was so fascinated and also a little slightly pissed off that I was just hearing it at 40. Um, and so I think that's really valuable information, and we eat, everybody eats, right? So now there's like these really effective combinations that we just eat at certain times, and food is medicine. So I want to commend you for writing that out so well and so easy to digest. Thank you so much. And we will send the thank you email out. If you're watching this after the fact, welcome. And if you enjoyed this and you want more information, please reach out to Banyan. Please reach out to Martina. We can connect you with her, but let's keep this information being passed down. Let's make this spread. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Martina. You guys have a great rest of your night. Bye.